Part 53. I secretly got married to a super boss. Author, Dance Lightly. Chapter 521. Chapter 521. Whose daughter is she? You must marry Suzy and become the young lady of the Su family. Dad Jiao Angzhen looked at him with a pale face. Even if Suzy causes me to have a miscarriage and you lose your grandson, you don't care. Of course Jiao Angzhen also understood that she could not break up with Suzy. Until a better choice is found, Suzy is undoubtedly the best choice. It's not that there are men with better conditions than Suzy in Yunqing. The Yan family, the Gong family, the Mo family, the Bai family, and the Shen family are all more noble and prominent than the Su family. But she knew how much she weighed. These young masters from aristocratic families have unusual status, and they are simply not something she can hook up with. Even if she were lucky enough to hook up with him and want to marry him, it would be impossible. Given the current conditions of the Jiao family and her conditions, she was lucky enough to be able to hook up with Suzy. Although she has now reached the position of a first-tier star, she has not produced enough works and her acting skills are not strong enough. She is barely able to survive in the first tier and may fall down at any time. Marrying into the Su family is undoubtedly the best way out at the moment. As for a wealthy family like the Yan family and the Gong family, it is simply impossible for a star from the entertainment industry to come in. In the eyes of ordinary people, the status of a celebrity is radiant and incomparable. But in the eyes of the real top wealthy families, they are no different from the actors of the old days. These aristocratic families are the most respectable. How can one let one's descendants marry an actor and make others laugh? So back then, Jiao Angzhen only focused on conquering Suzy and would not challenge those impossible things. This is how smart she is. But even if she wanted to maintain her current reputation, she couldn't break up with Suzy. When she heard these cold words from her biological father, her heart still dropped. If the person lying here today was Jiao Mian, would you advise her like this? At the mention of this name, Jiao Angzhen couldn't suppress the jealousy growing crazily in her heart, and her facial expression became a bit ferocious. You and Mom just said I heard everything you said. What is Jiao Mian's true origin? Whose daughter is she? Dad, Mom just said that she is the daughter of your master, so does she come from a famous family? Miss Daughter. She is not your biological child, yet you are so kind to her. Is it because of her true origin? Dad, tell me whose daughter she is. Jiao Angzhen only knew that Jiao Mian and Jiao Chen were brought back from the orphanage by Jiao's father. From the bottom of her heart, she looked down on Jiao Mian. She had never thought that Jiao Mian's biological parents might be very prominent people. How can that be possible? Most of those thrown into orphanages are poor families who are too poor to raise their children. Either they are children with disabilities. But when she just woke up, she heard the conversation between Father Jiao and Lin Huijin. From what Lin Huijin said, Jiao's father seemed to know Jiao Mian's true origin. But wasn't Jiao Mian brought back from the orphanage? How could Father Jiao know who her biological parents were? She has already lost to Jiao Mian in many things. The only thing that makes her feel superior is that her background is better than Jiao Mian's. End of this chapter. I secretly got married to a super boss. Author, Dance Lightly. Chapter 522. Chapter 522. No matter how much you hear, forget it immediately. No matter how poor the Jiao family is, she, Jiao Angzhen, is 100 times, 1,000 times better than a wild child in an orphanage. But if Jiao Mian's true background was better than hers, then she would not even have the only advantage over her. How can she accept this? Father Jiao looked at her twisted and ferocious face, his expression suddenly changed, his tone became colder, and he said with a hint of warning, "This has nothing to do with you. No matter how many times you have heard it, forget it immediately. Don't mention it again in the future." The more he defended Qiao Mian like this, the more Qiao Angzan became resentful and jealous. She bit her lip and said bitterly, "Why are you not allowed to mention it? Are her biological parents some kind of murderers? That's why her true origin is so invisible." People. Shut up. She is your sister and a child of our Qiao family. If you let me hear such words again in the future, I can't forgive you. Father Qiao was instantly angered. "Dad, you are partial." Qiao Angzan growled with red eyes, "I am your biological daughter. What is so good about Qiao Mian? Why do you treat a wild girl who is not related to you better than me? Why?" Hearing the word wild girl, veins popped out on Father Qiao's forehead. He raised his hand and wanted to slap her in the face. His eyes fell on her pale and bloodless face, and then he remembered that she was still a patient. He took a deep breath, suppressed his anger, retracted his hand, gritted his teeth and said, "That's your sister, not a wild girl. You have the nerve to ask me why. If you hadn't shamelessly snatched Suzy away, you can sister break up with Suzy? If she hadn't broken up with Suzy, she would definitely marry into the Su family. Suzy's parents have always been satisfied with her and have long recognized this daughter-in-law. But now it's better. What happened after this happened is just, I'm afraid Suzy has other ideas in his mind, and his parents are even more unwilling to accept you. If he really breaks up with you, just wait and cry." Father Qiao became more and more angry as he talked, his chest heaved violently, and he was very angry. "Brother Ace doesn't like her anymore. What does it have to do with me?" Qiao Angzan's eyes were red and she growled unconvinced, "It's because she has no ability and can't even look down on a man. Why should she blame me? If Brother Ace loves her wholeheartedly and only cares about her, how can anyone else take the man away from her?" Father Qiao was so angry that the fingers he pointed at her were trembling. "You are still reasonable. You are simply shameless." Qiao Angzan shed tears and said with a sneer, refusing to admit defeat, "What I said is the truth. Even if there is no me, there will be other women in the future. Being together with Brother Ace can at least ensure that the wealth does not go to outsiders. It can also help the Qiao family. Dad, since you feel that I am shameless and have done something sorry for my sister, why don't you let me break up with Suzy? After all, you are still afraid that if I break up with him, our Qiao family will be completely destroyed in the future. From this point of view, Qiao Mian is nothing more than that in your heart, and it is not as important as your interests. You stop arguing." Lin Huijin felt sorry for her daughter. She stretched out her hand to hold Qiao Angzan into her arms. She looked at Qiao's father with red eyes and a grieved face and said, "Master, Angzan just woke up from a coma, and she had another miscarriage. If you still feel uncomfortable, why don't you feel sorry for your daughter and just say a few words? I know you don't like Qiao Balian. Tomorrow will be a sweet scene between Mr. Mo and Mian. As for Qiao Balian and Suzanne, I will let them get their lunch boxes as soon as possible. Thank you, little Jasmine, for the tip. Thank you 1470049, Niwai, I will waste the rest of my life with you, 18023 for the reward." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I secretly got married to a super boss. Author, Dance Lightly. Chapter 523. Chapter 523, It's better to ask Qiao Mian. No matter what, an Xin is already with a Z. What she said is right. If a Z's heart is not with Mian, he will find another woman sooner or later. If he chooses to be with an Xin, at least he still has some influence on the Qiao family. Benefits. An Xin, you should say less. After Lin Huijin finished persuading her husband, she persuaded her daughter softly, "Your dad is in trouble and is in a bad mood, so he doesn't speak nicely. He is your dad, so don't really care about him. And Xin, you are in a coma. We have been here for a day and a night, so we still don't know some things. This time, our family is in trouble. All the businesses your dad invested in before have gone wrong. Now the funds cannot be returned and the projects have been interrupted. Now there is an urgent need to invest another sum of money to start the project. Otherwise, if all the projects are unfinished, he will lose a lot of money. Big. At this juncture, you must never break up with Suzy. He is the only person who can help our Chiao family now. You don't know, your dad is planning to sell the house. But where will we live after selling the house? Besides, even if the house is sold, the money will not be enough, Lin Huijin said, wiping tears. Qiao Angzhen was stunned, and then her face changed. Selling the house? Yes, Lin Huijin said sadly, otherwise, how can we raise so much money at once? It costs hundreds of millions, and you can't come up with it? Hundreds of millions. Qiao Angzhen's face turned ugly for a moment. Mom, do you want me to borrow several hundred million from Brother A's? This little money is not a big problem for the Su family. However, based on Qiao Angzhen's understanding of Suzy may not borrow it. It was not possible to borrow it before, and it is even harder to say now. Suzy is not a stingy man. He often bought expensive gifts for her in the past. But those expensive gifts are far behind compared to hundreds of millions. Lin Huijin nodded, only he can help our Qiao family. He has always been generous to you. This time something like this happened to him, and he must bear the main responsibility. He must be very guilty of you now. If you talk to him, he won't reject. Qiao Angzhen refused without thinking, Mom, I'm sorry, I can't help. She could already feel that Suzy wanted to break up with her. At this juncture, if she borrowed money again, I'm afraid Suzy would want to get rid of her sooner. She must not let Suzy know the current situation of the Qiao family. What? Father Qiao's face turned gloomy. He didn't expect her to refuse and said angrily, what do you mean, you won't help? Qiao Angzhen said calmly, Dad, it's not that I don't want to help, but that I can't help. You've seen Brother A's attitude. If the child in my belly hadn't fallen out, there might still be hope, but now. She mocked, he wants to kick your daughter away, do you think he will still be willing to spend hundreds of millions to help the Qiao family? Qiao's father was startled when he heard Qiao Angzhen continue to say, instead of begging me, you might as well beg Qiao Mian. The man she is dating now is not simple. I think she can easily spend hundreds of millions. Dad has raised her for so many years, and it's time for her to repay your kindness in raising her. Lin Huijin was stunned for a moment, then immediately agreed, Master, and Xin is right. Last time we met that man, he seemed very stylish and wealthy, and he also valued Mian. You usually treat Mian so much well. If you talk to her, she will definitely not reject you. End of this chapter. I secretly got married to a super boss. Author, Dance Lightly. Chapter 524. Chapter 524. In fact, she has never been in an orphanage. Qiao Mian? Father Qiao frowned and refused without thinking, no, how can she get so much money? Qiao Angzhen was almost furious. Just now, Father Qiao asked her to borrow money from Suzy. When talking about Qiao Mian, she said she had no money. She sneered, it seems that the only option is to sell the family house. Lin Huijin's face changed instantly, Master, the house can't be sold. Where will we live after we sell the house? Just go and beg Mian. You have doted on her since she was a child. There is no way she will die without saving you. Father Qiao was silent for a long time, then turned around silently, I'll think about it again. After saying these words, he left the ward. As soon as Chiao's father left, Chiao Angzan squeezed Lin Huijian's hand, gritted her teeth and asked, "Mom, what happened to what you just told Dad? Chiao Mian, isn't she a child in the orphanage?" As soon as Lin Huijian heard her asking about this matter, she immediately looked around nervously, got up and closed the door of the ward. Then he returned to the bed and lowered his voice and said, "Please keep your voice down, don't let your dad hear it. I don't know exactly what happened. It was said that she was brought back from an orphanage, but in fact she has never been in an orphanage." "What?" Chiao Angzan said in shock, "she has never been in an orphanage? Then why did Dad?" "It's just to hide some secrets." Chiao Angzan clenched her fingers, her heartbeat suddenly became very fast. "What secret?" Lin Huijian shook her head, "Your dad is very hidden, and even I don't know many things. In the early years, he worked for others, and the boss was very kind to him and said he even saved his life. Later, something happened to his boss and he had to take refuge. Before leaving the country, he entrusted a child to your father. That child, is he Chiao Mian? Chiao Angzan became nervous unconsciously, and her breathing slowed down. Yeah, Lin Huijian nodded, "That's her." "How could this happen?" Chiao Angzan seemed a little unable to accept it. "So, doesn't it mean that Chiao Chen was not brought back from the orphanage?" "Yes, Chiao Chen." Lin Huijian frowned and said, "Your father has a patriarchal mentality and brought Chiao Chen back to continue the family lineage. Then Chiao Mianmian's biological parents never came to see her again. For some reason, Chiao Angzan had a vague hunch that Chiao Mianmian's identity might be very unusual, and she felt particularly uncomfortable when she thought about it." "Probably not." Lin Huijian looked indifferent. "I encountered a very difficult situation at that time, so I went abroad to seek refuge. Perhaps, the disaster was not avoided at all. Otherwise, it would be impossible to leave my biological daughter in the country for decades." "Don't even care. Haven't avoided it? That means death." Thinking of this possibility, Chiao Angzan felt secretly happy and felt much more comfortable. So what if Chiao Mianmian's biological parents are really great people? Everyone is dead, and she is still an orphan. She finally had a smile on her face, and a feeling of relief. Lin Huijian didn't know what she was thinking. She was only worried about what happened between Chiao Angzan and Suzy. She held Chiao Angzan's hand and hesitated for a while before saying, "Angzan, what's going on between you and Ace? Does he really want to break up with you?" End of this chapter. I secretly got married to a super boss. Author, Dance Lightly. Chapter 525. Chapter 525, He Wants to Be Beautiful. Speaking of Suzy, the smile that appeared on Chiao Angzan's face immediately disappeared completely. Lin Huijian looked at her face and said carefully, "Xin, Mom knows that you have been wronged. However, you also know what the situation at home is like now. If you break up with Suzy, it will be difficult to find her again in the future. A man of his condition. You have to think about it carefully." "Mom, it's not me who wants to break up with him." Chiao Angzan bit her lip, her eyes were red, and said bitterly, "It's him who wants to break up with me. He is still thinking about that little Chiao Mian, and now he wants to. I broke up and went to reconcile with that little as soon as possible." Lin Huijian was shocked and said with an ugly face, "Didn't that little fall in love with a wild man? Didn't Suzy know about it?" "He knows." Speaking of this, Chiao Angzan became even more angry, but he felt that Chiao Mian was forced, and he wanted to save her from the dire straits. "What should we do?" Lin Huijian was anxious. "You are currently signed by his company. If you break up, then you—" "Mom, please stop talking." "Okay." Chiao Angzan lay back on the bed with an irritated look on her face and said in a very bad tone, "I'm already annoyed enough. You can go out. I want to be alone. Peace of mind." Chiao Angzan directly pulled the quilt over her head and refused to have any further communication. Lin Huijin stood by the bed for a while and left helplessly. After she left, Qiao Angzhen took out her mobile phone and dialed Suzy. It rang for a long time, but no one answered. She hung up with a gloomy face, and quickly called again, but still no one answered. With a bang sound, Qiao Angzhen was so angry that she smashed her phone to the ground. Does Suzy really want to break up with her? Did he wish he could break up with her right away so that he could go find that little Qiao Mian? He thinks beautifully. She will not break up with him easily. No way. Asterisk. After Qiao Mian woke up, she saw a set of newly bought clothes placed beside the bed. In the clothes bag, there was also a note saying that the underwear had been disinfected and cleaned, so she could wear it without worry. Qiao Mian read the contents on the note, pursed her lips and smiled, thinking that Wei Zhen was quite thoughtful. She walked into the bathroom with the bag of clothes and changed into them after washing herself. The skirt Wei Zhen bought has a slightly low neckline. After Qiao Mian put it on, she stood in front of the mirror and took a look, and found that the marks on her neck and chest were particularly obvious. Densely packed, it's a bit scary to look at. She frowned and moved her hair to her chest, blocking most of the traces. It wasn't until he felt that he was no longer so conspicuous that he walked out of the lounge. She saw Mo Yesi sitting in front of a black solid wood desk, a fitted silver-gray shirt wrapping his perfect and smooth figure, and a collarbone exposed on his slightly open chest. The pair of slender and somewhat unnaturally long legs overlapped in an elegant posture. He rested his head on one hand, leaning his head, and was looking at a document in his hand very attentively. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I secretly got married to a super boss. Author, Dance Lightly. Chapter 526. Chapter 526 Mom, it's not me who wants to break up with him. Attentively, Qiao Mian had already walked beside him, and he hadn't noticed it yet. Qiao Mian didn't say anything, just stood aside and watched quietly. She lowered her head and could see that the lines of the man's profile were particularly perfect, with a full forehead, a straight bridge of nose, and the slight curve of his thin lips. The sunlight filtered through the dark curtains and shone a little on his handsome face. It was as if his perfect and deep facial features were coated with a layer of pale golden light. Qiao Mian has always known that Mo Yesi is good looking. He is the best looking of all the men she has seen since she was a child. She was shocked by his outstanding appearance the first time they met. Sometimes, she would secretly rejoice, thinking that being able to marry Mo Yesi was as lucky as gold falling from the sky. This man was of good family background, good appearance, good figure, and strong earning power. He was also very obedient to her and pampered her like a little princess. Such a husband is hard to find even with a lantern. She was able to meet him because God was really blessing her. At this moment, when she saw him again, she would still feel this way in her heart. Stunning, just like the first time we met. Qiao Mian just stared at it like this for a while. The man who was concentrating on reading the documents suddenly raised his head and looked straight at her. "Baby, you're awake, did you sleep well?" Seeing her, the man immediately put down the documents in his hand, stretched out his long arms, and pulled her into his arms. "Baby, you're awake, did you sleep well?" Seeing her, the man immediately put down the documents in his hand, stretched out his long arms, and pulled her into his arms. Before Qiao Mian could say anything, he held her chin and lowered his head to kiss her gently. Mo Yesi kissed her for a long time, until she was almost out of breath, and then he let go of her. Qiao Mian sat on him. As soon as a certain idea came into Mo Yesi's mind, she felt it immediately. Suddenly, like a frightened little white rabbit, a look of panic appeared on his face. He reached out and pushed him, and immediately jumped off him. Then he stepped back several steps and looked at him defensively from a distance. Moyesi was stunned and raised his eyebrows in a funny way. "Baby, what's wrong with you?" Chiao Mian said nothing. He raised his thin lips slightly, half squinted his eyes, turned the black leather chair to face her, changed to a lazy sitting position, hooked his fingers at her and said, "Baby, come here, give me a hug." Chiao Mian looked at him defensively and shook her head. "No. She doesn't want to go there." She was afraid of him. Moyesi smiled, his eyes looked a little evil, and he said in a low voice, "Are you afraid of me?" "Baby, what are you afraid of? Is it possible that I can still eat you?" Chiao Mian. She was just afraid that he would eat her. He is just a hungry wolf that eats people without spitting out their bones. But not coming, Moyesi raised his eyebrows, with a faint smile on his lips. He looked at her lovingly for a while, then stood up and walked towards her. "Okay, then I'll have to come over." As soon as Chiao Mian saw him approaching, she was like a little sheep seeing the big bad wolf. She was so frightened that she turned around and ran out of the office. As soon as he took a step away, he was hugged by someone. End of this chapter. I secretly got married to a super boss. Author, Dance Lightly. Chapter 527. Chapter 527. Chapter 527. Come here and give me a hug. Chiao Mian sat on him. As soon as a certain idea came into Moyesi's mind, she felt it immediately. Suddenly, like a frightened little white rabbit, a look of panic appeared on his face. He reached out and pushed him, and immediately jumped off him. Then he stepped back several steps and looked at him defensively from a distance. Moyesi was stunned and raised his eyebrows in a funny way. "Baby, what's wrong with you? He is definitely a big beast." Moyesi also glanced down at her gaze, and then a teasing smile appeared in his eyes. He raised his thin lips slightly, half squinted his eyes, turned the black leather chair to face her, changed to a lazy sitting position, hooked his fingers at her and said, "Baby, come here, give me a hug." Chiao Mian looked at him defensively and shook her head. "No. She doesn't want to go there." She was afraid of him. Moyesi smiled, his eyes looked a little evil, and he said in a low voice, "Are you afraid of me?" "Baby, what are you afraid of? Is it possible that I can still eat you?" Chiao Mian. She was just afraid that he would eat her. He is just a hungry wolf that eats people without spitting out their bones. But not coming, Moyesi raised his eyebrows, with a faint smile on his lips. He looked at her lovingly for a while, then stood up and walked towards her. "Okay, then I'll have to come over." As soon as Chiao Mian saw him approaching, she was like a little sheep seeing the big bad wolf. She was so frightened that she turned around and ran out of the office. As soon as he took a step away, he was hugged by someone. "Little one, where are you running?" The girl's petite body was as light as a feather, and he easily picked her up like a princess. Then, regardless of her struggle and resistance, he carried her to the sofa, then bent down and gently put her on it. As soon as she was put on the sofa by Moyesi, she immediately turned over and wanted to jump off. "Are you so afraid of me?" Moyesi was amused by her, and he held down her small body with a bit of laughter. His other hand fell on the top of her head and rubbed it like a kitten or puppy. "Don't worry, I'm not that low of a beast. So, you don't have to hide from me like this." Moyesi thought to himself, if he really wants it, can she escape? Although he was an animal, he was not an animal to the point of completely ignoring her body. He had that thought at the moment, but it was just a thought. After hearing what he said, Chiao Mian calmed down and stopped struggling. But there was still a hint of defensiveness in her eyes, and she did not completely believe him. She bit the corner of her lip and said dubiously, "Really? You won't touch me again today?" Yesi knelt down and pulled up one of her legs. Chiao Mian stiffened and immediately asked warily, "What are you doing?" End of this chapter. I secretly got married to a super boss. Author, Dance Lightly. Chapter 528. Chapter 528. I'll give you a push. Yesi. What is it like to be guarded by your own wife like a thief? Are your legs still sore? Yesi put the question aside for the time being, took off her shoes, put her legs on his lap, and placed his other hand on the most sore part of her legs. Press gently. His voice was gentle and he whispered, "I'll press it for you." The man's fingers were slender and strong. The hand he usually used to sign contracts and documents, and earn tens of thousands of dollars a day, was massaging her. He was very good at holding it, but it was not too heavy and not too light. After pressing for a few minutes, Chiao Mian felt that the soreness was relieved a lot. Yesi asked her while pressing, "Is the force too strong?" Chiao Mian looked down at the top of his dark hair and the way he knelt down on one knee to massage her. A sweet taste came to her heart, and a certain place in her heart became very soft. The corners of her lips raised slightly, and she said in a sweet voice, "No, it's very suitable. Do you feel more comfortable?" Yet Chiao Mian pursed her lips, feeling the urge to reach out and touch his hair. She thought so in her heart, and her body quickly acted on it. Her white and soft little hands reached out and touched his short, dark, soft, and shiny hair. The man who was massaging her stiffened. Chiao Mian was also stunned for a moment when she felt the silky smoothness of her fingertips. Sorry, she immediately took her hand back, thinking he minded. She knew that some men hated having their heads touched. There is a saying that the head can be cut off, but the hairstyle cannot be messed up. "I don't mind." Yesi was stunned for a few seconds before returning to normal, and continued to hold her other leg, with a gentle smile in his deep voice, "You can touch it if you want." As soon as Chiao Mian heard that he didn't mind, her paws felt a little itchy again. Yesi's hair is of very good quality, the kind of person who doesn't even need special effects when filming a shampoo commercial. She just touched it and felt that it felt very good. If he doesn't mind, she would like to feel it more. Yesi chuckled, "You can touch any part of my body. You can touch it as much as you want, for as long as you want." Chiao Mian. Her little face suddenly turned red. Why did she feel that Yesi's words were ambiguous? Could it be that her thoughts are too dirty? Why does she feel a little lewd? However, since he said he didn't mind, she was welcome. Chiao Mian's white and soft little hand stretched out again, landed on the top of his head, gently touched the ends of his soft hair, and said in a soft voice, "Yesi, have you massaged others before?" It feels like the strength of his massage is very good. It doesn't look like it's the first time I'm giving someone a massage. Yes. Yesi knelt down in front of her, pinching the soft flesh of her legs, with a soft look on his handsome face. "When I was at home, I pressed my grandma's legs. How about it? Is my massage skills okay?" Chiao Mian suddenly understood. She had been to Mo's house once, so she naturally knew that the old lady had some leg problems. Grandma's legs. Chiao Mian lowered her eyes and looked at the top of his dark hair, hesitated, and asked in a low voice, "Why is it bad? Will she always be like that in the future?" End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I secretly got married to a super boss. Author, Dance Lightly. Chapter 529. Chapter 529, Do his brothers know that he is such a gangster? Although the old lady can walk by herself. But it was still very difficult without anyone to support me. No matter what, it is impossible to be the same as a normal person. She suffered some injuries on her legs in the early years, and her legs didn't heal very well as she got older. The problem on her legs won't be cured, but it's nothing. There are so many people in Mo's house taking care of her, so it doesn't have a big impact on her. Big. Chiao Mian nodded. She looked at the man squatting in front of her, holding her legs patiently, without showing a trace of impatience on his face. She felt warm and sweet in her heart. This proud and noble man, at this moment, is just an ordinary husband who loves his wife. He is willing to put aside his distinguished status and let her and him get along on an equal footing. In their world, he is not the young master of the Mo family, a prominent family, nor the CEO of the Mo family, a top conglomerate. He is a man named Mo Yesi, her husband Chiao Mian. Perhaps this is nothing special to ordinary people. But it is extremely rare for people with their background. Every person who comes from a wealthy family has had a sense of superiority since childhood. If they are not from the same circle, how many of them would be willing to make friends with others on an equal footing? The higher the level of wealth and aristocracy, the more obvious the class distinction. Don't say that they are unwilling to make friends with ordinary people. Even if they are in the same upper-class society, they are still divided into different levels. For example, the Su family may sound like a famous family, but it is just a famous family in the eyes of ordinary people. Compared with the Mo family, the Yan family, the Gong family, and the Bai family, they are not even qualified to be compared. And Mo Yesi was born in the Mo family, the head of the four great families. He was born as a proud man of heaven, and his status is beyond words. There have always been others who accommodated him, supported him, and relied on his wishes. Why should he lower himself to accommodate anyone? At this point, no one can force him. Unless it is of his own free will. If he is willing to lower his status for someone, accommodate the other person, and support the other person, then this person may be more important than his life. Mo Yesi. Chiao Mian suddenly felt a surge of tenderness in her heart, her eyes were gentle, and she called him in a soft and sweet voice. Mo Yesi felt her tenderness and raised his head. His deep and handsome facial features were so beautiful. Chiao Mian looked into his deep eyes, and her heartbeat skipped several beats. She looked at the man's overly handsome face, bit her lip and took a deep breath. She suppressed the throbbing in her heart and asked softly, "You've been pressed for so long, are you tired? Why, do you feel sorry for me, baby? How good my physical strength is, didn't you feel it clearly a few hours ago?" The man's lips curled up and he smiled charmingly. Chiao Mian. All right. She was speechless as she looked at the evil curve of the man's lips, and the trace of tenderness that arose in her heart suddenly disappeared. She naturally heard the other meaning in his words, her face felt hot, and she couldn't help but glare at him. Can't you be more serious? Talk dirty words to her anytime, anywhere. Do his subordinates know that their leader is such an irregular person? Do those brothers of his know that he is such a gangster? I'm afraid, they don't even know. End of this chapter. I secretly got married to a super boss. Author, Dance Lightly. Chapter 530. Chapter 530. You need to exercise more. This man is as cold as he pretends to be outside. To the outside world, he always looks like a flower on the high mountain. The words "keep away from strangers" are written all over his body, which makes people think that he is very difficult to approach and they dare not approach easily. He will only act like a hooligan in front of her. He would only be so immodest in front of her. If she told others that Mo Yesi's true side was that he was a gangster and pervert, no one would believe it. Serious, Mo Yesi chuckled, I'm usually very serious. But when I see you, I can't be serious anymore. What should I do? Baby, if you want me to be serious, you can only do it under one possibility. Under what circumstances, even though she knew that what this man said was not what she wanted to hear. Chiao Mian couldn't help but ask. Mo Yesi curled his lips, and the hand on her leg suddenly hooked around her waist. The moment he stood up, he took her into his arms and sat on the sofa. Chiao Mian sat on his lap like a child, and he held his chin and kissed her heavily. The man bit the corner of her lip and said in a low voice, "Whenever you let me eat enough, I will show you the truth." Chiao Mian. Haven't he had enough to eat today? Mo Yesi gently rubbed his lips against hers twice, as if he could see what she was thinking, and his laughter was low and sexy. "Do you think those 2 times are enough to satisfy your husband? Today, I'm looking at you. I'll let you go because you're not feeling well. If you want to feed me completely, I'm afraid your small body can't do it now. Baby, you have to exercise more, otherwise, how can you bear me in the future?" Zhang Luli is right. His little baby's body is a bit weak and cannot withstand his repeated abuse. This is a lack of exercise. From now on, he will have to pull her to exercise more often. With a boom sound, Chiao Mian's face seemed to be on fire, and her fair and tender face glowed with a gorgeous blush. This man, he doesn't even know how tired he is. Your physical strength is so good. Mo Yesi, don't even think about it. Chiao Mian bit her lip and glared at him with a red face, looking fierce. "You are not allowed to touch me again for the next few days." She was scared. This man is like a wild beast that is insatiable. At that point, he has no control at all. It looked like he wanted to eat her up and wipe her clean without even spitting out the bones and dregs. While bullying her, he also told her things like he wished he could die on her. It made her ears feel hot. At that time, Mo Yesi was still the Mo Yesi she usually knew. It's like a different person. In short, Chiao Mian was really afraid of him after personally experiencing how energetic he was at that time. "Okay, I won't touch you." Mo Yesi reached out and touched her head, looking like he was very talkative, and agreed without hesitation. Anyway, no matter what she says now, he will agree first. Whether it can be done is of course another matter. At work, he has always been a person who keeps his promises. Whatever you promise, you will definitely do it. But to my own woman, sometimes, he doesn't mind being a little rogue. The update is completed today. Have a happy weekend everyone. Thank you to Niwai, Tang Tang, Sister Feng, Lanhua, 15186, Lu Qing, 1807988, Xiao Tian, 13867. End of this chapter.